Henry once again left me out in the pouring rain for another girl. He thought I would still shamelessly cling to him, but he didn't know that this time, I had finally decided to give up on him. I deleted all his contact information, and did everything I could to avoid him. It seemed like he was starting to be uncomfortable with my withdrawal. At the school anniversary celebration, he deliberately invited the girl who had bullied me to dance with him. He also dated my roommate late into the night. In the end, he was holding another girl and blocked me downstairs by the dormitory. Victoria, are you still causing trouble? If you keep it up, I'll really get a new girlfriend. I looked at him and smiled softly. Henry, your new girlfriend is quite pretty. I genuinely wish you both happiness. The car came to a screeching halt in the rain. Henry yanked open the car door and dragged me out from the back seat. I couldn't steady myself and ended up falling clumsily into the muddy ground. Victoria, a shameless girl like you is truly rare. He looked down at me with a scornful sneer. See that girl sitting in the front seat? She's my new girlfriend. I slowly sat up and wiped the mud from my face. The rain poured even harder, soaking my hair and sticking it to my face. As the mud was washed away, my face revealed itself to be small and pale. Henry's gaze shifted slightly, and he frowned. Go home by yourself. Don't follow me. With that, he turned to get back into the car. Henry, with muddy hands, gently tugged at the hem of his coat. So, we're really breaking up now, right? As soon as I finished speaking, laughter erupted from inside the car. His new girlfriend, in a delicate voice, said, Henry, your ex is so difficult. Henry laughed too, impatiently pulling away from my grasp. Victoria, enough. I admit, I did like you before, but now I'm tired of you. Got it? I nodded, my clothes drenched and cold against my skin. It was unbearably uncomfortable, so don't cling to me anymore. I only kissed and hugged you, didn't sleep with you, so I don't have to be responsible. Understand? I nodded again. Yes, I understand. He said no more, gave me one last look, and got into the car. After that night, I got sick. I lay in the dorm for 2 days before going back to class. I had deleted all of Henry's contact information. I would often pass by their college on my way to class. I used to hope to run into him on campus, but now, whenever I saw their group from afar, I would immediately hide, though it might have been my illusion. Previously, even when I tried to meet him deliberately, I often wouldn't see him for days, but these days, I kept running into him. Yet, each time, I deliberately avoided him. Until the school anniversary gala, Henry saw me and my roommate. He walked straight towards me. Victoria, isn't Henry supposed to invite you to the first dance? He invited you last year, my roommate asked quietly, but Henry didn't invite me. He didn't even acknowledge me. Instead, he bypassed me and invited another girl, a girl who had once bullied me and had pursued him. As Henry danced with that girl in the center of the floor, my fingertips were already numb. My roommate Wendy cautiously asked, Victoria, are you okay? I shook my head. I'm fine. You all enjoy yourselves. I think I'll head back. Who Henry likes or pursues is none of my business. It's just that he knows very well how badly that girl once treated me. He had once felt sorry for me, even stood up for me fiercely, but now, it seemed he had forgotten all about it. I didn't want to cry, but as I walked out of the hall, tears still fell. What I didn't expect was, a week later, Henry started dating my roommate Wendy. He sent her flowers and gifts every day. During classes, he openly sat next to Wendy. After class, he would kiss Wendy in public. Wendy came back to the dorm later and later. One day after school, he came to pick up Wendy, and as he passed my desk, he knocked over my bag. There was an acrylic charm on the bag, a small gift he had given me. It had been there for so long that I had forgotten to take it off. Now that charm was broken. Henry raised an eyebrow at the charm and then looked at me, still keeping it, so sentimental. I expressionlessly bent down, picked up the broken charm, and tossed it in the trash. As I left, the room was eerily silent. As soon as I walked out of the classroom door, I heard a heavy thud. It sounded like a desk being overturned, and mixed with Wendy's scream. The next morning, as I went downstairs, I unexpectedly saw Henry. The girl with him was different again. She was unfamiliar but very pretty. Victoria, Henry called my name. I didn't want to respond, but he came directly to block my path, still causing trouble. Keep it up, and I'll really get a new girlfriend. I wanted to laugh but felt like I was choking, unable to make a sound. The Henry who had once cornered me in the Churchill family garden, late at night and passionately kissed me. The Henry who had comforted and promised to only love Victoria. At this moment, he was truly despicable to the extreme. I remained silent, and Henry seemed to be a bit flustered. Victoria, as long as you stop causing trouble, I'll overlook the past. You deleting my contact, and avoiding me at school, I won't hold it against you. I suddenly looked up at him and smiled faintly. Henry, your new girlfriend is quite pretty. I genuinely wish you both happiness. Victoria. I didn't turn around, nor did I stop or look back. For someone as proud as Henry, coming to me first was already a form of humility. In the first place, the status between us was uneven. I shouldn't have been greedy. He was the young master of the Churchill family, but I was merely an orphan taken in out of charity. My father had only been a driver for the Churchill family. For years, I relied on the Churchill family for my living. I remembered their kindness and always kept in mind my own place. But who can control their feelings when young and infatuated? Being overly greedy is just the price I have to pay. The only consolation now is that the Churchill family doesn't know about my relationship with Henry, and I'll keep this failed relationship to myself. That night, I drank a lot alone. I missed the dorm curfew. I had to return to the Churchill house, feeling awkward. Henry's parents were on vacation recently, and the old master was recuperating in the mountains. There were no elders at home, so there was no need to worry. But when I stumbled in, still drunk, and changed my shoes in the dark hallway, I accidentally bumped into someone. I was so startled I almost cried out for help. Victoria! Oliver's voice rang out as the lights came on. When I saw the man in front of me, I nearly had a heart attack. After a moment of hesitation, I stammered, Uncle. Uncle Oliver. Oliver frowned and looked at me. Have you been drinking? Just a little bit at a classmate's party. I was too flustered to look at him, but also too drunk to stand steady. Oliver gave me a glance. Go sit over there. I hurriedly moved to the edge of the sofa and sat down. I'll have the kitchen make a bowl of hangover soup for you. Wait here and drink it later, he said, about to call someone. I quickly stood up. I grabbed his sleeve awkwardly. Uncle, no need to go to such trouble. I'll be fine after a nap. I'm not a young lady of the Churchill family. Even if the elders are kind and loving, I still remember my own place and never overstep. Oliver withdrew his hand coldly. My head was spinning and my legs were weak. His withdrawal made me collapse to the ground. Oliver was very tall. As I fell, my forehead hit his belt buckle. The sharp edge scraped a cut, which immediately started to bleed. I covered the wound, tears welling up in my eyes. Uncle. Oliver quickly moved my hand away, cupped my face, and bent down to examine the injury. At that moment, unsteady footsteps came from the hallway. Then Henry's drunken voice called out, Victoria, Victoria. Oliver's expression changed slightly as he looked at me. I was anxious, afraid he might notice something was wrong. In a flurry, I wrapped my arms around Oliver's waist, and buried my face in his chest. Victoria. Henry, just past the hallway, saw his uncle bending over, holding a girl. The girl was kneeling in front of Oliver, her arms around his waist. The pose was intimate and suggestive, which instantly sobered Henry up. He hurriedly turned to leave, but in his unsteady steps, he knocked over a decorative item on a cabinet. The noise was loud. Henry's breath nearly stopped. The one person he feared the most in the Churchill family was his slightly older Uncle Oliver. Seeing him with a girl tonight made Henry wish he were blind. Sorry, Uncle, get out. Oliver's voice wasn't loud, but it was steady and calm. It made Henry's heart race with fear. He didn't dare linger and almost fled the scene. As the door slammed shut, Oliver coldly pushed me aside. I quickly distanced myself from him, not daring to look up. The wound on my forehead was burning with pain. I didn't dare touch it. I'm sorry, Uncle. It was me. Not daring to admit it was because I was afraid of being caught by Henry, I could only mumble. Oliver saw me sitting on the floor, listless and pale. The blood on my forehead was still fresh, and the area around the wound was red and swollen. His expression softened. Come with me, I'll take care of the wound. With that, He turned and went upstairs. I didn't dare delay, using my hands and feet to get up, but my legs were too weak to move. I barely steadied myself by leaning on the sofa. Oliver took a few steps, noticed I wasn't following, and looked back at me. Victoria. I lowered my eyes, tears welling up. I'll just put some medicine on myself. No need to trouble you, Uncle. He was silent for a few seconds. Do as you wish. With that, he went upstairs. I slowly looked up at his retreating figure. My mind was in chaos, but now it was too late to say anything. I could only hope Oliver hadn't noticed anything unusual. I stumbled back to my room. Moments later, someone knocked on the door. Opening it, the servant handed me a bag. Miss Victoria, these ointments are from Mr. Churchill. I took the bag and stared at the ointments, feeling somewhat stunned. Thank you for me, Uncle. All right, get some rest. As I watched the servant leave, I felt a strange pang of sadness. The next morning, as soon as I arrived at school, Henry blocked me. With a hangover from the previous night and troubled thoughts, I hadn't slept well. I wasn't in the mood to deal with Henry's nonsense. I acted as if I hadn't seen him, and turned to leave. Victoria. Henry didn't chase after me, but his next words made me stop in my tracks. I'm planning to tell my parents about us. I was stunned. Henry, are you out of your mind? I was trembling with anger, my hands and feet cold. He stepped closer, frowning at my forehead. How did you get hurt? None of your business. Answer me. Why are you telling my uncle and aunt? Besides, we've broken up, so it doesn't matter. Who said we've broken up? Henry sneered. Victoria, it's normal for young couples to break up and make up. I'm not asking you to get back together. So let's be as we were before. You're still my girlfriend. Henry's smile was malicious and sinister. Victoria, if you don't obediently reconcile with me, I'll tell my parents that it was you who actively seduced me. You were young and derobed in front of me, deliberately letting me see your body. You seduced me in my prime, so of course, I couldn't control myself and made a mistake. Do you think my parents would let you off if they knew their usually well-behaved daughter did such things privately to seduce their precious son? Henry, you're talking nonsense. You're despicable. I was so furious I cried, raising my hand to slap him. Henry didn't dodge. The slap was hard. His face immediately showed red handprints. I admit I went too far before, and I apologize. Henry touched his face, suppressing his anger. Consider this slap an apology. Are you calmed down now? After he finished speaking, he hugged me as he used to. Victoria, stop making trouble. You know I like to have fun, and just find some amusement with them. Don't you know how much I like you? He leaned down to kiss me. I trembled all over, raised my hand, and slapped him again. Henry, I will never reconcile with you. Say whatever you want. I have nothing to be guilty about. Victoria, are you sure you want to keep this up? Henry's face grew darker. He was the most precious young master of the Churchill family, and no one had ever touched him before. Yet, I had slapped him twice. I knew there was no good outcome from tearing things apart with Henry, but I was just an orphan with nothing left to lose. The worst outcome was just losing everything again. I'm not making trouble. Henry, I just want to tell you, that night when you pushed me out of the car, we were completely over, and I no longer like you. I wiped away my tears. Feel free to take revenge. Everything I have now comes from the Churchill family. Even if you take it all away, I won't hold any grudges. Victoria, don't push me. You know that everything I, Henry, want, I can get, but I'm a living person too. Henry, no matter how low I am, I won't continue to like you after you've humiliated me over and over. I knew Henry wouldn't let me off easily, but I never expected he would do something so outrageous. When I received the call from the Churchill family's aunt, I had just come out of the library. It was noon, and the sun was making me drowsy, but I felt like I had fallen into an ice pit. Victoria, the driver is waiting outside the school gate. Please come back. Aunt, is there something wrong? Aunt Churchill's voice was unusually cold and distant. Come back first, and then we'll talk. I left the school gate, feeling anxious. I was restless all the way, thinking about what Henry had said before. I couldn't help but feel my heart sinking into an abyss. When Henry and I had secretly started our relationship, it was initially very sweet. I was new to love, and Henry had plenty of experience. He told me what to do, and even though I was shy, I obediently complied. If Henry tells the elders that it was me who initiated everything, I can't bear to think about how to face the usually kind and understanding elders. I would also be too ashamed to continue living in the Churchill household. Sure enough, just as I expected, when I returned to the Churchill house, as soon as I entered the living room, Aunt Churchill threw a stack of photos in front of me. In the photos, I was soaking wet, wearing a white men's shirt, smiling at the camera. My expression was both innocent and enticing. I remember this occasion clearly. That day, when Henry and I came back from a date, it was raining. We were both soaked. Henry suddenly had an idea and gave me his shirt to wear after I took a shower. I was very compliant and put it on. He seemed to really like me dressed that way. That night, he kissed me continuously, almost losing control. Later, he took many photos of me with his phone. Victoria, I'm going to keep these photos just for myself. No one else can see them. He even created a private album with only my photos. Victoria, you've really disappointed Auntie. Aunt Churchill was clearly furious, her face dark with anger. Auntie always regarded you as a daughter, and has treated you well over the years. How could you send such photos to Henry privately? I looked at the photos, speechless. The clothes were something I agreed to wear, and the photos were taken with my consent. Moreover, no one in the family knew about my relationship with Henry. Aunt Churchill had already decided that I seduced Henry. How could I explain? Over the years, the Churchill family has raised me. My life, from clothing to food to living conditions, has been no different from that of a young lady. I owe them such a heavy debt of gratitude. I would do anything to repay them. Why should I make my uncle and aunt embarrassed? Auntie, it's my fault. I had thoughts I shouldn't have had. I squatted down and picked up all the photos. Rest assured, Auntie, I've already made up my mind. I won't do such shameless things again. Today, I'll move out of the Churchill house. I will always remember the care and kindness the Churchill family has given me over the years. I won't forget it. Uncle and Auntie, I took a deep breath, holding back tears, and bowed deeply. I've let you down. I'm sorry. I bowed again. Uncle and Auntie, I'll pack my things and leave now. After saying this, I turned and prepared to go upstairs. But then I saw Oliver standing not far away. He had returned without me noticing. His suit jacket was draped over his arm. I didn't know how much of the conversation he had overheard, but at that moment, I couldn't care less and just wanted to leave quickly. So I just gave a hasty nod and said, "Hello, Uncle, what happened?" Oliver asked. "Nothing. I'll go upstairs first." "Nothing. Why are you crying?" I then noticed that my tears had started flowing freely after I turned around. Oliver took the photos from my hands. I wanted to grab them back, but when I met his gaze, I hesitated. Like Henry, Oliver was one of the people I feared the most in the Churchill family. Even though he was the one who suggested the Churchill family adopt me, and provided me with a home and a stable life for all these years. Because of these photos, Oliver looked at the two people behind him. Brother, sister-in-law, it's not Victoria's fault regarding the photos. What? Oliver glanced at me and handed the photos back to me. I took these photos of Victoria. Oliver. Uncle, but Henry said. Henry and Victoria had an argument a few days ago. Oliver smiled faintly. That kid is holding a grudge, and deliberately playing a prank on Victoria. Aunt Churchill suddenly sighed in relief but looked at Oliver with confusion. But Oliver, how could you take such photos of Victoria? Yes, Oliver, Victoria is still a child. Uncle Churchill also voiced his disapproval. I felt completely disoriented. I looked at the man in front of me with disbelief, until Oliver walked over to me, and took my hand. She's 21 now. How is that a child? Oliver looked down and gently stroked my hair. Being in a relationship isn't a mistake. The situation ended in a very strange way. I somehow became Oliver's little girlfriend. Aunt Churchill apologized to me, and scolded Henry. He's getting more and more unruly. Indeed, he used to bully Victoria, and now he has the audacity to pull such a prank. Victoria is a girl. How important is her reputation? This time, I will definitely give him a severe lesson. Henry really is out of line. Oliver kept holding my hand. Brother, sister-in-law, Why not let him come to the company, and gain some experience with me first? Aunt Churchill was immediately delighted. Great, Oliver, I trust you completely. Just make sure to train him well, and don't go easy on him. Rest assured, Oliver added, I'll take Victoria out. We won't have dinner at home tonight. Once in the car, Oliver finally released my hand. He told the driver to start driving, and asked softly, what do you want to eat? Anything is fine. Oliver gave the driver an address and then opened the partition between us. Victoria, he turned to look at me. I remember when you first came to the Churchill house. You were only 9 years old. Yes, I was momentarily stunned, and looked at him. Uncle, when did you start dating Henry? A year ago. But I've broken up with him. Do you still like him? I was silent for a moment, feeling a slight ache in my heart, but I still gently shook my head. I don't like him anymore. Oliver nodded slightly and looked at me again. Are you sure? I nodded. Yes. Tomorrow, you'll move out of the old Churchill house. I will send someone to pick you up once you've packed your things. Uncle, where are you taking me? To my house. But, your current status is my girlfriend. But, this is fake. I know you're just helping me out. Don't you want to? No, it's not that. It's just that you're my uncle. You're an elder. Victoria, I'm just Henry's uncle. By age, I'm only 8 years older than you. Oliver looked at me, and if I'm not mistaken, it was you who first attracted me. Thinking about that night, I truly had no words. He noticed my reaction and softened his tone. And you staying with me means Henry won't dare to bother you anymore. It's a temporary measure. Think it over. I moved into Oliver's house. The house was much closer to my school. Oliver was very busy, so I usually stayed in the dormitory during the week. Only on weekends did he come to pick me up. Henry was arranged to intern at the company a few days ago. He was sent abroad. Fearing Oliver, he didn't dare slack off at work. Therefore, he was too busy to bother me. When he returned from his business trip abroad a month later, he arrived at the school to find me just as I was getting out of Oliver's car. Goodbye, Uncle. I waved at him, ready to leave. I had called him that since the first day I came to the Churchill house. During this month, I hadn't seen him much. And of course, I hadn't changed how I addressed him. Oliver called out to me, Victoria, is there something else? I took a couple of steps towards the car. Oliver grabbed my wrist, giving a slight tug. Before I realized it, he pulled me into his embrace. Uncle, I was a bit flustered, afraid that passing students might see. Change how you address me. Oliver touched my slightly disheveled hair. Call me by my name from now on. But I couldn't bring myself to say it. Someone who I had always called uncle since I was little. How could I now call him by his name? I'll pick you up tonight. He released me, and I quickly stood still. But suddenly, my arm was roughly yanked. Victoria. Henry's eyes seemed to be ablaze with anger. What are you doing? You even dare to flirt with my uncle. Henry. Oliver got out of the car and grabbed Henry's wrist. Let go. Uncle, look at Victoria. If nothing unexpected happens, 2 years from now, Victoria will graduate, and you should be calling her auntie. Oliver's gaze was stern as he looked at Henry. From this minute on, show her some respect. Henry was clearly stunned. I also looked at Oliver in surprise. Victoria, go back to the dormitory. I won't let her go. Henry was in a state of collapse. He clung to me, refusing to let go. Uncle, Victoria is my girlfriend. This joke isn't funny at all. This is not a joke. Oliver's cold gaze fell on Henry's hand. Remove your hand. I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. Henry shook his head repeatedly. I know. Victoria, you're doing this on purpose to make me angry, aren't you? Seeing that he wouldn't let go, Oliver, no longer willing to argue, called his assistant over. Get him out of here. Henry tried to resist, but Oliver's gaze was unwavering. Try causing trouble again. Henry was extremely reluctant but ultimately did not dare to make a scene. Once Oliver saw him off, he walked back to my side. Don't overthink it. I'll handle things. Understood. I'll pick you up tonight. Go on up now. Oliver watched me enter the dormitory before leaving in the car. As soon as I entered the dormitory, Wendy turned and walked out with a cold face. She had been dumped by Henry after dating him for half a month. After the breakup, Wendy realized she might have been used as a pawn. Understanding this truth made her somewhat resentful towards me. Actually, I wanted to make amends with her, because Wendy was one of the first friends I made in college. We had always gotten along well. If it weren't for Henry, we wouldn't have fallen out. Victoria, can you and Wendy reconcile? To be honest, Henry is really a jerk. It's no wonder Wendy is angry. I thought the same way. How could a girl like Wendy withstand the advances of someone like Henry? I should go talk to her and sort things out. Yes, you two should have a good talk. If there's anything, just clear it up. We're all in the same dorm. I talked with Wendy for a long time. She still had some grudges against me, but she was willing to mend our relationship. That night, Oliver came to pick me up as promised. He seemed to have been socializing and had quite a bit to drink. As soon as I got into the car, without even having a chance to greet him, Oliver pulled me close. I tried to push him away, but he held on tighter. Victoria, you uncle, you're drunk. I am drunk, but I'm very clear-headed. He gazed at me with slightly tipsy eyes, but his gaze gradually softened. Is it okay? I didn't say anything but didn't shake my head either. During this period, I had slowly come to have a different view of him. Even starting from initial discomfort, I began to look forward to spending more time with him. Oliver pulled me into his embrace. He lowered his head and kissed me. The taste of alcohol was strong between our lips. I don't drink, so it felt spicy. I shook my head and tried to push away. Oliver looked at me, then stopped, seemingly a bit tired, and buried his face in my neck. Victoria, his voice was hoarse, and he adjusted his tie awkwardly. I have a headache. Somehow, the usual fear and distance I felt from him seemed to soften a little because of his rare show of weakness. Well, do you want to go to the hospital to see a doctor? No need to go to the hospital. He shook his head and hugged me tighter, finding a more comfortable position. The smell of hospitals makes me feel worse. Then what should we do? You've massaged the old man before. Oliver lifted his eyelids and looked at me. I want that too. The driver in the front seat couldn't help but chuckle and quickly shut his mouth. I couldn't help but mutter softly, Uncle, are you really drunk or just pretending? This was so unlike the usual Oliver. I gathered my courage and gently pressed on his temples. If it's uncomfortable, just let me know. After a while, seeing that he didn't say anything, I asked softly, Uncle, is the pressure okay now? Moments later, Oliver suddenly grabbed my wrist. Stop talking. It's noisy. I held my breath and increased the pressure slightly. In the dim car, Oliver's lips seemed to hold a faint smile. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have thought it was an illusion. After that day, my relationship with Oliver seemed to have taken a step closer. Before, when I lived in the Churchill house, I was afraid of him. Whenever I saw him coming from afar, I would immediately run away like a frightened mouse. But now, living under the same roof, I even dared to argue with him occasionally. He was very busy, but every Friday night, he would consistently pick me up. Although we lived in the same house, we still slept in separate rooms. Oliver was a restrained and self-disciplined gentleman, except for the 2 nights on weekends, when he would ask for a goodnight kiss. There weren't many affectionate gestures. As I spent time with him, I gradually relaxed. Even for the first time in years, I felt a sense of ease, as if I was at home. The elders of the Churchill family were all very kind to me, but as a child living under someone else's roof, one is always sensitive and precocious. Though I had everything I needed in the Churchill house, I never had a sense of belonging. Even during the few months when Henry and I were deeply in love, it wasn't there. But with Oliver, I felt this sense of belonging. I didn't even realize when I began to look forward to Fridays, looking forward to seeing his car parked downstairs, looking forward to seeing him when I opened the car door, looking forward to cuddling on the living room sofa and casually watching a movie, looking forward to those goodnight kisses on those 2 nights. I really liked it when he called me Victoria. There was a kind of affectionate intimacy that softened the heart. It made me feel like a child again, able to be a bit willful without worrying about being disliked, without being driven out of the house. Just before the summer vacation, Oliver had to go on a business trip to France for half a month. He originally planned to take me along, but I had an important exam at that time, so I couldn't go with him. On the day after the exam, Wendy invited the people from our dorm to go out for karaoke to relax. I returned to the dorm, took a shower, and while waiting for my hair to dry, I video called Oliver. He took a while to answer. In the video, Oliver is wearing a navy blue shirt in an office-like room. He'll be back in 3 days, but I started missing him the day after he left on his business trip. Are you about to head out? We're going out to sing karaoke with my roommates, and might have a few drinks. Let me send a car for you. I'll pick you up when you're done. There's no need for that. They're just my roommates and classmates. How did your exam go? Not bad. I looked at Oliver on the screen and couldn't help but gently touch his face. Uncle, you're coming back the day after tomorrow, right? Yeah. Do you want me to pick you up? Oliver chuckled. You're driving. I huffed. I got my driver's license right after the college entrance exams. All right, then you can come pick me up. Then I'll go dry my hair. Victoria, is there anything else? Uncle. On the screen, Oliver looked at me with a relaxed expression. For a moment, I even sensed a hint of tenderness. Call me when you get back at night. I know. I brought you a gift. In the video, I smiled with my eyes squinted. Thank you, Uncle. You're the best. Go on, dry your hair. Otherwise, you might catch a cold. Got it. On the way to the karaoke gathering, I felt an exhilarating joy. So much so that I ended up drinking a bit more than usual. Since there were mostly girls, we mostly ordered beer, fruit wines, and low-alcohol cocktails. But with so many different drinks, I soon felt a bit dizzy. At that moment, Wendy came over with a drink. Victoria. She handed me the drink. Have one. I propped up my dizzy head and smiled at her. So if I drink this, we're good. Wendy laughed. Yes, finish this drink and we're good. I wasn't being pretentious. I took the drink and downed it. Wendy did the same. Let's go outside and talk. The private room was too noisy to have a proper conversation. I followed Wendy outside. This room is empty. Let's sit here for a bit. Wendy led me to the end of the hallway and opened the door to a private room. I didn't move forward. Wendy. She turned back, her smile fading. If I'm not mistaken, someone is in this room, right? I was suffering from a severe headache, barely holding onto the wall for support. Having grown up as an orphan, in the care of my father's former employer after his death, how could Victoria, who had grown up so cautiously, be an unguarded fool? Victoria, don't blame me. Wendy walked over and grabbed my arm. It's Henry, who asked me to bring you here. If I didn't comply, he'd post my photos online. Wendy's pale face revealed a bitter smile. I really liked him, but he never liked me. I'm doing this not for him, but for myself. Victoria, unlike you, I have parents, and I can't afford to lose face. Neither can my parents. She pulled me into the room. As I struggled, Henry's hands were already firmly gripping me. Wendy let go, her expression blank. Wendy, I called out in vain, but she had already closed the door with her eyes shut. My vision went dark. Henry's body pressed against me from behind, and the strong smell of alcohol enveloped me. Victoria, I should have taken you a long time ago. I shouldn't have hesitated because of your age. I struggled desperately, but Henry's strength was astonishing, and my body was becoming increasingly uncontrollable with heat. He turned me around to face him, lowered his head and kissed me roughly. I wanted to push him away fiercely, but a powerful desire within me was overwhelming, controlling me. My uncle is very particular. Victoria, once I've been with you, he'll never want you again. In this lifetime, you will die in my hands. Even if you die. His clothes were ripped open, and the cold air rushed in. My mind, already ravaged by drugs and alcohol, was barely lucid, but I had a few seconds of clarity. When Henry lowered his head to kiss me again, I mustered all my strength and kneed him hard. But what I thought was my full strength was merely a minor nuisance to Henry. He only groaned in pain and then reached out to choke me. Victoria, when did you start flirting with my uncle right under my nose? How many women have wanted to climb into his bed over the years, and he's ignored them all? Why you? He knew you were dating me. Henry's handsome face was slightly twisted at this point. I couldn't breathe and clung desperately to his hand. Just as I was about to suffocate, Henry suddenly released his grip. Then he threw me onto the sofa. Just as he was about to press down on me, The door of the private room was suddenly kicked open from the outside. I felt my body lighten. Then there was the sound of something heavy falling and Henry's pained scream. And then, Oliver's angry face appeared in my view. His suit jacket fell down, covering my almost naked body. Victoria! He bent down and picked me up, wrapped in his embrace, surrounded by his scent and warmth. I felt safe and couldn't help but bury my face in his chest, tears streaming down. Uncle, how did you get here? Wasn't he supposed to be in France? Wasn't he supposed to come back in 3 days? I finished my work and came back early. Oliver tightened his hold on my arm slightly. It's all right now, little one. It's over, Oliver. This seemed like the first time I called him by his full name. His footsteps paused for a moment. I felt him lower his head, and a soft kiss landed on my forehead. Once we were in the car, I started to act up, but it wasn't really my fault. Wendy had put something in the drink she gave me. I felt unbearably hot all over, as if ants were biting me. As we neared the hospital, Oliver almost had to strip me of my clothes. My high body temperature made him seem cold, so cold that I wanted to press my whole body against him. Oliver, somewhat helpless from my constant rubbing, pinched the bridge of his nose and shook his head. Victoria. I clung to him, my limbs wrapped around him. Oliver, kiss me, I said, holding his face and leaning in for a kiss. My throat felt like it was on fire. His lips were cool, with a faint hint of mint. I couldn't help but ask for more. Oliver, I need water. I'll get it for you. He tried to push me away, but I tightened my grip around his neck. No need to get it. You already have some. Oliver wrapped me in his coat and carried me back to the room. Take a shower first. He carried me to the bathroom. The water temperature was deliberately set a little lower. At first, it was a bit soothing, and I stopped pestering him. But less than 5 minutes after getting out of the shower, I started feeling unbearably hot again. Oliver's shirt and pants were damp from the water. The thin fabric clung to his chest and abs, making his muscular lines incredibly tempting. I stared, unable to look away, unable to resist. I clung to him and touched him all over. This time, Oliver didn't push me away. Instead, he placed me on the sink and grasped my chin, kissing me deeply. When I was dizzy from the kisses, he whispered in my ear, Victoria, are you still uncomfortable? Uncomfortable? Do you want to feel better? I nodded vigorously. Oliver lifted me up. Hold tight. But there's no free lunch in this world. To feel good, you have to endure some hardship at the start. I almost kicked Oliver off the bed, but I still felt wronged. You're a liar, and you're bullying me. Oliver restrained my struggling legs. He held my wrists above my head with one hand. He leaned down, and with a smile that was somewhat mischievous, said, Yes, I'm bullying you. His smile made me dizzy. Naturally, I was thoroughly dominated by him. For the entire night, Henry stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. That night was quite unfortunate for him. After being kicked by his little uncle, he broke 2 ribs. As soon as his injuries were healed, he was sent abroad. Regarding Wendy, Oliver asked for my opinion. I thought for a long time if I pursued this matter. Putting something in Wendy's drink was no small matter. It would involve criminal responsibility. She wouldn't graduate and would have a lifelong stain on her record. I'm not a saint, but it seemed a bit cruel to ruin Wendy's life like this. However, I couldn't just let it go either. In the end, I decided that while this matter could stay out of the police's hands, she had to face school disciplinary action and expulsion. Wendy was expelled from school. On the day her parents came to pick her up, I was also at the school. As she left the dorm with her family, she cried uncontrollably. I felt a twinge of sadness too, but no matter what, one must pay the price for their wrongdoings. In society, others won't give her a second chance to be cruel again. When Oliver called me, he could tell I wasn't in a good mood. That evening, he drove to pick me up and take me home. He didn't take me out for a fancy dinner. Instead, he cooked for me, making steak and pasta. We also shared a little red wine. Finally, while we were relaxing on the terrace, I asked him, Have you liked me for a long time? Oliver shook his wine glass and said, I'm not that twisted. I couldn't help but laugh. I'm not talking about years ago. Oliver took a sip of his wine and said, Before you were secretly dating Henry, so why didn't you tell me? Oliver set down his glass and reached out his hand to me. I took his fingers and leaned into his embrace. If I hadn't broken up with Henry, would you have kept silent forever? No. Oliver stroked my hair and said, I wavered when I saw you weren't happy with him. When did you realize that? One night, I came back late, and you were alone, crying in the garden pavilion. I heard you calling Henry over and over, but he didn't answer. In the end, you were blocked. I thought you'd be crying harder, but you weren't. Oliver paused here. He held me a little tighter, his voice dropping to a softer tone. You not only stopped crying, but you also said something to yourself. What did I say? Oliver looked down and kissed me gently. You said, it's no big deal. Victoria, it's not like it's the first time I've been abandoned. There's nothing to cry about. Tears silently streamed down my face. I was just speaking the truth. After my parents divorced, my dad raised me alone. When I was little, I hated my mom for leaving me, but when I later heard she had passed away, I was still incredibly sad. And then, my dad left me too. I've faced farewell after farewell from a young age. So, as I grew up, heartbreak didn't seem so painful. It felt like I was used to it, living alone. That won't happen anymore. Oliver gently patted me. Victoria, I'll be with you from now on. Oliver, why do you like me? Oliver looked at my tear-streaked eyes. At first, it was pity. You were just a little girl, an orphan, which was quite sad. Then, watching you grow up, you seemed to be walking on thin ice, but still pretended everything was fine, which made me heartbroken. But pity and heartache don't equate to romantic love. Oliver smiled slightly. Later, when I found out you were secretly dating Henry, I couldn't sleep well for half a month. I knew something was wrong. Then why were you so angry that night, when I was drunk and hugged you, even though you clearly liked me? I thought you were deliberately using me to upset Henry. I'm not that petty. I poked his chin. I've long stopped liking him. And me? I felt a bit dazed, looking at Oliver, but seeing the teenager he was over a decade ago, thin and handsome, as upright and outstanding as a young poplar tree. The Churchill living room was filled with people. I still had a white flower pinned to my chest. Dad's funeral had just ended. They were discussing what to do with me, the orphan. My dad had died in the line of duty. The Churchills had a good reputation, and Mr. Churchill was kind. He took care of my dad's funeral arrangements. Mr. Churchill even arranged for me to have a bank account, with the compensation money deposited there. At that time, distant relatives emerged wanting to adopt me. It would have been the easiest arrangement for the Churchills. Henry's parents were inclined towards this as well. I was only 9. But I vaguely understood that I was probably going to follow these unfamiliar cousins to another province. I had never met these relatives before, and now they were coming out of the woodwork. Their faces were unsettling even to a child like me. Perhaps it was because of the 2 million compensation money from the Churchills, but at just 9 years old, I was helpless, like floating duckweed, drifting with the current, at the mercy of others. But then Oliver suddenly spoke up. Let her stay with the Churchills. It's not a big deal. We can afford her. After all, her father died serving the Churchills. Taking her in will also reflect well on the Churchills. He walked up to me and took my hand. Victoria, do you want to stay? At that moment, I was as frightened as a startled bird. But when Oliver held my hand, it felt like a drifting boat had finally docked. Subconsciously, I felt that this unrelated little uncle was somehow more reassuring than these so-called cousins. I nodded through my tears, clutching his hand tightly. Oliver wiped my tears away. Then you'll stay with the Churchills. He was well regarded in the Churchill family. Mr. Churchill adored his youngest son, who resembled him and was smart and steady. He rarely asked for anything, so when he did, Mr. Churchill couldn't refuse. So, I stayed with the Churchills, a driver's daughter. Yet I grew up living comfortably like a young lady. My fate was rewritten because of Oliver. In a twist of fate, this man I once timidly called uncle became my boyfriend and gave me a home. My eyes were a bit misty and warm. Oliver, thank you. Victoria, you know what I want to hear. I clung to his neck, not wanting him to see my tear-streaked face. He wouldn't know that, when I was young, the people who appeared in my dreams often took on Oliver's form. As I grew older and became more timid, I thought I'd never touch the unreachable things. so I didn't dare to dream of them. I deliberately forgot everything cleanly. The feelings of youth were completely severed before they could fully grow. Luckily, fate allowed us to rekindle. Oliver, carry me to the bedroom, and I'll tell you slowly. Okay. Oliver picked me up. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat. It turns out that every love has a traceable origin. When 17-year-old Oliver held the hand of 9-year-old Victoria, now 21-year-old Victoria willingly wants to promise him a lifetime. The story ends here. Please subscribe to the channel for the latest updates. A large number of novels are updated daily.